Took emergency action today, putting the state's new gun reform law into effect immediately rather than waiting 3 more weeks for the effective date.
Western Mass News reporter Reagan Stoddard joins us live in studio with more on why she did this and reaction from the community. Reagan?
Abby and Chris, Governor Healey signed this emergency preamble earlier today, putting these latest gun control measures in place right now.
Back in July, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey signed the state's newest gun safety bill into law. On Wednesday, she signed an emergency preamble in private, making the law effective immediately rather than the original October 23rd effective date. In a statement from Governor Maura Healey, she says, "This gun safety law bans ghost guns, strengthens the extreme risk protection order statute to keep guns out of the hands of people who are a danger to themselves or others, and invests in violence prevention programs. It is important that these measures go into effect without delay." This comes as a petition drive is underway opposing the law and attempting to get the issue in front of voters to decide. Western Mass News spoke with Springfield attorney Daniel Hagan, who specializes in firearm laws and has been involved with those behind the grassroots petition effort.
It's a terrible bill. It doesn't add anything to public safety. It really doesn't. By definition, the criminals don't follow the law. And so we're adding more requirements for people who do follow the law.
He shares his thoughts about Governor Healey's emergency preamble.
So now, months after she originally signed this with no emergency, is suddenly saying, uh-oh, there's an emergency. And again, the emergency is the people are speaking.
He tells us what the next step might be for those groups against the bill.
And so the next step is to have lawsuits and injunctions to stop some of these provisions from actually taking effect, so that people aren't, without the ability to go hunting and the like.
Coming up at 6, we speak with a local gun shop owner about the repercussions his store and others may face with this new law. Reporting live in studio, Reagan Stoddard, Western Mass News.